We're just going to bring the meeting back to order. I'm taking my mask off because we have external representatives in today. It's a requirement to have masks on, but I've been advised that if everyone around you is comfortable and we've got the 2 metres distance there and the 1 metre down there, that it's okay to take your mask off for speaking to the council. And so we dealt with the minutes of the Audit and Risk Management Committee, so now we move to Council Draft Annual Report for the year ended 30 June 2021, and we also have the Interim Audit Management Report. So I'd like to welcome Kim to the meeting, who is our Audit and Risk Management Committee Chair. So thank you.
Morena, and thank you, Leanne. I'm Kim Wallace. I'm the Chair of the Assurance and Risk Management Committee for Christchurch City Council, and it's a pleasure to be here today and to be at the end of the audit process. So just a couple of points I'd like to note ahead of making and passing on the recommendation from the committee. So we followed a process which is similar to what you would have heard about in previous years. We met on several occasions to review the draft annual report in detail. In one meeting on the 22nd of September, we did adjourn that meeting, which we then reconvened on the 5th of October to ensure that when we were meeting and at the point of the meeting, we had complete information in front of us, which included the management sign-off report, and also the audit was at a point in time where there were only minor issues that were yet to be completed. Further to that, our considerations included in-depth review of the draft financial statements and other financial reports that you're going to be making publicly available after this consideration. Our due inquiry included the significant assumptions and judgments, which are always present when you are looking at financial statements, so taking a look at those and ensuring that they were reasonable and appropriate, as well as compliance with applicable New Zealand and international accounting standards, which are continually changing and does mean that there's substantial work from time to time that the management team have to work through, and of course we then have to consider whether it's appropriate. We were pleased to see some changes in the reporting format were adopted this year, which we believe strengthen the readability of the financial information that's in the annual report as well. That will be an ongoing process where next year we will also look at opportunities where we can further improve the way that the disclosure notes in particular sit against the numbers in the financial report. Our process included meeting with Audit New Zealand, who are present behind me here. We have Chantal Ganetsky, who is the audit partner, and also Karina Page, the senior auditor on this on the council process as well. And in doing this, we were able to make due inquiry of them as to the appropriateness of the process and also the approach that was adopted. I also note that subsequent to our meeting, there have been final minor changes that were pending. I have been informed of those and comfortable also that they were satisfactorily completed. And Audit New Zealand have issued an unqualified audit opinion subsequent to our meeting that's dated today. So overall, in conclusion, we are satisfied that the underlying quality of the information and approach that was adopted in producing the report is both reasonable and also adequate. And we duly recommend to Council to adopt the 2020-2021 annual report. And I'd just like to take this moment to acknowledge and thank the team, both within Council and also with Audit New Zealand, for the work that they've put in this year. A significant amount of time invested, as you can imagine, with COVID and with the resources. This put tremendous pressure on time this year, but again, I just want to stress that the process was not undermined by this, but certainly there was a significant amount of work and effort put in, and I just want to thank the team for that. Thank you.
Sorry.
I'll speak so
This
you
is
don't have to take the mask
impossible.
off. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate that. There's a couple of things I just want to say first, and then I'll take you through the very unusual process that we need to undertake to actually request you to adopt this council report today. Just a couple of reflections from me as I've come in, obviously, in the last few months. And I've been told a number of times in the last few weeks that no one actually ever reads this 290 pages. I can guarantee that the people around this table have read it a number of times. But I do think it is quite important, and we will get a summary version out within the next month for people to read, which will be a bit easier. But there is some really good messages in here. And I do urge everybody, including the public, to actually do read some key messages that are coming through here. As the CFO, obviously, I take great pleasure in looking at the NPAT, but from a council point of view, that's sort of a given, and it's expected to be an NPAT. So our NPAT of 95 million is success, and our total assets of 15.9 is quite crucial. But actually, what is more impressive from this annual report is that in spite of COVID, the council has delivered 89% of a capital program, both core and external. That we have not needed to borrow the 36 million of COVID debt that we expected to in the last year. That was required because of the operational savings, that we've achieved further operational savings and increased dividends from Christchurch City Holdings this year due to the sale of Rebus. That the airport and the seaport, the two commercial entities that have been significantly impacted by COVID, have still exceeded their results this year, which really sets us up for the future. And even though I'm an accountant and I love numbers, there are some quite key numbers that I think we should also look at, which are not just financial. We have actually replaced 15 kilometres of water supply mains. We've managed to reseal 78 kilometres of roads. We've processed 4,806 new building consents. We've received 6,109 walk-ins into our front desk. And working with our OCHT, the Otatahi Community Housing Trust, who have managed to add 118 new homes into their portfolio. This is what I believe is the success of this annual report. And on that basis, what I would request is that we just go to our recommendations, unless there's other questions. Do you want to open to questions, Mayor?
Thank you. Sorry, it's just very hot. Yanni.
Thank you. I had three questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
The first section talks about the long-term plan, that every submission was considered. Sorry, it's hard because it's such a big document. But essentially, I just wanted to, so it's just on page 21. And it says every submission we received is considered and ultimately helps inform our final decisions about our investment in infrastructure and services. And after considering all the feedback and debating possible changes, the LTP was adopted. Did anyone from Audit and Risk look at the amendments that were put forward and whether they were validly ruled out of order in terms of the submissions that were made?
The OAG did. So we requested if there was any significant changes from that point of view. So we were, it wasn't actually an audit and risk job to review that. Audit and risk were over, as was Audit New Zealand, in regards to the LTP that was audited.
Okay.
But in regards,
maybe it's helpful if I just explain the concern and just to have some assurance. I was concerned that some of the amendments were ruled out of order on the basis that there were no submissions, when there in fact were submissions asking for things to be put on budget. And I was concerned that the robustness of the advice back on those amendments didn't actually reflect the submissions that people had made. So I just want an assurance that someone is looking at that to make sure that when people actually participate in a public process, that the response is fair and reasonable.
yeah,
What I can attest to is the Assurance and Risk Committee were updated on many occasions about the LTP process and the adoption of that. Sam, you might have to help me out. Or Andrew, I do recall we went through a page of LTP changes and some of the essence of the submissions. I don't have, as Leah said, we didn't have line of sight of every submission and the gating process, but we understood that we were given an update about the gating process and how that helped. I think, Sam, unless you've got some...
I mean, it was quite an unusual... It's the first time that we'd really had such strong advice against certain amendments being put, and it was quite a difference in how things had been done in the past.
The only thing to add to that, I mean, Kim's quite right, the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee had a lot more oversight, I think, than probably previously in terms of this stuff, and probably more so because of the COVID focus as well. But I'm just wondering what would be quite useful, and Leah will be able to get it, is the closeout report on the amendments, and if we get that might actually be tabled at the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting, because I mean this is obviously the annual report as opposed to the LTP, but if we can close that off through Audit and Risk, because I actually agree there are some issues with it, and Dawn's pretty much acknowledged she's keen to address them for the next one, so we'll just do that for the next committee meeting. Leah can do that.
Thank you. The other question, the other two questions on page 252, we get disclosure of council employees, and then further on we get going down into 35.2, and that's on page 254. We get an outline of our company's activities. But I guess I was really interested in whether we could, in part of the annual report, disclose the senior remuneration of our companies. I mean, I know that they do it as part of their annual reports, but it does seem quite hard for us to get an overview of what's happening with things like senior management remuneration, having to go through each individual report rather than having it listed in our annual report, given that they're our companies. So I just wondered if that's something that we could look at going forward so that we can see very clearly what's happening in that regard.
That is something that we would have to seek permission from the individuals concerned. So there's one thing in regards to having bandings, but to actually disclose individual remuneration would need the approval of the actual individuals themselves.
Right. So we could either do bands or if the individuals were agreeable, we could include that in our annual report.
If they are agreeable, yes.
Okay. And then just the final question was on page 264, where, sorry, I'm just trying to bring it up. It was around the severance pay that's listed. There's one very large severance package, and I mean, I just wondered if we were able to give any more details about why, or what understanding we can give the public over why such a large severance payment.
What we have put into our report is what is required to be put in. Anything further than that would actually risk identifying the people involved, under which we wouldn't be able to do that under privacy rules.
Yeah. Okay.
Any more questions? Anne?
Morena, thank you. Leah, this document is written in a way that is really quite difficult to understand and probably not accessible to the average person. And you mentioned before that you'll be working on how to make this information easier, presenting it in a way that is easier to understand. So can you tell us a bit more about that? Because I think that it's as it is at the moment, it's pretty much inaccessible. So yeah.
So there's two parts to it. One is a lot of this document is based on financial statements.
Yeah.
And I wish I had the power to actually change what we're required to put in there. There's not much I can do about that, other than the fact that what we have done this year is put policies and put some commentary boxes in to actually explain what we're doing. We were talking about what Kim that are working through is next year. We also have a summary report that will come out within the next month, which is a summarise, which is more words and talking about the highlights, which I think is more accessible to the residents that you're talking about. Some of the things that we need to look at, though, is how we actually present the strategic objectives of the council and how we are actually delivering on those. We're always going to have the requirements to put our levels of service and how we're achieving that, but we are going to review how that is done to make it a bit more succinct. We will also drive towards how we're going to put sustainability reporting into our annual report. Now, whether that happens next year, but we need to start driving through some of those reporting as the group will be doing from a task force on financial disclosures that will be required to come through in the next couple of years. So it's going to be a work in progress, but we are committed to actually try and get as many people reading this as we can. Online, not digital, not paper. Yeah.
So, and some of the highlights that you actually outlined would be perfect, those points. And also, I think it's page 100, there are some questions that would be really good. What we do, what we did, how did we measure up, how much did it cost, and what next?
Correct.
That would be fantastic just to have something simple like that would be good. So thank you for that.
All good. Any other questions? Happy to move. Sam, seconded Andrew. Any discussion? Yanni?
Thank you. I just wanted to move additional resolution around requesting that the senior management remuneration bands and quantums be considered for future reports from our council companies. So I don't know what the best wording is based on the response.
Could he just repeat that?
Sorry, I just wanted to, based on the question that we had, the answer that was given, that we could make the request to have disclosure of either the salary bands of senior executive remuneration from our companies, or we could actually ask
Have
for
their
the
own annual
individual
reports. They're their own companies. This is for Christchurch Council's annual report.
Sorry, there's lots of stuff in here that's actually in their annual reports. If you read the section on our council companies, it was just a request. I'm not saying that has to be done, but based on what I heard the staff say, that there was no issue with raising that.
Request.
Hang on, he's entitled to move an amendment, and yeah.
It's just not a very clear amendment. Is it just for chief executives or senior management? There's quite a substantial difference. And that's the point Leah's making. We disclose chief executives' remuneration individually, but the general managers that sit within them can't be identified. So I would hate for something to be put that legally is not possible.
Yeah, I'm happy to leave it as the senior executive remuneration bands.
Well, no,
The bands are required by law to be published.
It's just whether you have it in the
So what you want is the individual information lifted out of their annual report, some of which come after our annual report.
Correct.
we
That
actually
is
get-
the challenge.
But that's why they have their own annual report.
I know.
Could we actually get advice on that before we?
Just have an annual report for
It'd just
every
be
company
good to
in the
get some
world.
advice on it.
What advice?
Read their annual report
Sorry,
if you want to know about their
the
company.
person who's seconding the motion has.
I won't second it because I think I'd prefer advice on it. If it's in their own reports, then why do we need it in this one?
Sorry,
And
we
and
are
what can-
technically in debate. Yanni's moved an amendment, and often it's difficult in the course of a discussion like this that people move amendments without notice. I mean, that is problematic, as I have said on a few occasions before. At this stage, I don't have a seconder for the motion, in which case it fails for the want of a seconder. So carry on with the debate, Yanni.
Thank you. Look, I think the annual report is a really important tool for transparency with our community about what we're doing as a city. And I personally think it is good to give a reflection of what's happening with our council companies. The reality is that chief executive and senior executive remuneration has been a touchstone issue for so many people in our community, particularly with the things like the COVID impacts as well. And I think there has been a real desire for the community to understand how people are being remunerated and at what levels at that senior executive in those senior executive roles. So I can't see any problem with getting greater transparency around reporting. We should be open and transparent. These are public companies and they're part of the council, and we have no issue with putting other things about our companies that are in their annual reports also in our annual report. So I would have thought putting reporting against things like the living wage and the senior executive remuneration would be a very sensible thing to do if you believed in having transparency. I did also want to express concern around the severance, and I don't know whether we're going to get a briefing on that or what measures there are to kind of, help people understand. But it is a huge quantum, and I would have thought that we should be able to get at least some greater explanation as to that quantum. But I just wanted to also acknowledge that, appreciate the work that Audit and Risk have done, and certainly look forward to the amendment closeout report being, because I think what's really important is for the community that have made submissions to our annual plans or to our long-term plans, that they also have to have confidence in that process being fair and robust. And I think, given the extraordinary way in which a number of amendments were ruled out of order, it is important to close that loop. So I look forward to that work happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Oh,
Are there others? Sarah? Thank you.
Kia ora, just briefly. While the information in here is, it's really good, it's what we have to do, and I'm looking forward to the summary and things. Reporting on finance and levels of service, those kind of things is really important. And I think that going forward, the reporting on the wellbeing, sustainability especially, I'm really looking forward to seeing how we do that. It's crucial. Council plays such an enormous role in how our city operates and the potential to change to be more sustainable for our future. So I'm looking forward on to the reporting, hopefully next year, on that as a start.
Andrew?
Thank you. I think it's important that we focus on positives here. This is an important tool. It certainly does have a role. Taking Anne's point, there are aspects of it that are not easy to understand, and that's why a plain language summary is so important. But I think the important things for this meeting today, we have run a good and robust process, which is well documented in this report and its attachments to get the annual report to this point today. The point was made by Leah, and I reiterate it, in a very unusual year, and despite significant disruption because of COVID, projects have been delivered to a high degree of what was budgeted and planned. Significant operational savings have been made. CCHL dividends have been delivered to a greater degree than we expected. Additional debt hasn't been needed to be drawn down as we'd anticipated that it might. Activity in general across the board has continued to high levels, and that's resulted in a sizable operating surplus and a significant increase in asset values. So all of this represents, I was going to say a good result, but I'm tempted actually to say an excellent result. And it's important that in looking at the detail, as we should, we don't lose sight of what actually is a very positive big picture. So I'd like to acknowledge everyone that's been involved in bringing this report to the point where it can be finalised today. I'm aware of a huge amount of work that's gone on in the background, both at CCHL and here, and with Audit New Zealand, and through the Audit and Risk Management Committee. Thank you to everybody involved. It's good that we've got such a good report that's gone through such a good process that we are able to finalise today.
Yeah, well, I'll probably echo a wee bit of what Andrew had said, in that, I mean, this is a very technical thing that we have to do every year to give assurance to the people of Christchurch that we're using money correctly. So, look, I don't disagree with Sarah that we do need to comment on all that stuff, but if we're actually thinking about what we're here for, it's a legislative requirement that we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to Audit New Zealand to oversee and to deliver. I think I actually do agree with you, Yanni, in some respects around the severance and that. There's no surprise there's been restructures through the year, and that is kind of an operational issue that I'm sure would be worked through. But, and you can have a look at how the senior management stuff can be published in time, and we can do that proactively. But I would really hate it to be lost on the public that we aren't being transparent around this. If you look through what Leah and the team have done here, with really adequate oversight from Kim and a lot of good independent people, there are comments under every note in green, which I don't think you can spell out more clearly to the public. And it'd be remiss of me not to point out one of them, which says that, staff numbers fell by 4%. I would like 10, but 4 is a really good start. And so, we have to look at all this stuff. And I think the public can interpret it. the comms team will work through with Leah and that how we can better articulate it in a real summary. But to conflate, I guess, the LTP and the annual report together like this, it doesn't really help the public try and understand what we do. So I agree with Andrew, it's a good news story. Probably the only thing I would say is, looking at the result here and how it has been good and we haven't borrowed as much, when we go into the next annual plan, I think we need to put a lot more focus on the growth element of the rateable properties, because that's where a lot of our saving has come from. So as much as there's been an OPEX saving, there's also been offset by, I guess, a building boom in Christchurch. So yeah, let's not get lost on some of the negative stuff when I think the team and the externals have done a really good job. So happy to move it.
Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Sorry?
Just 1 and 4 to start with, please.
Oh, sorry. No, so from a technical point of view, I need to move 1 and 4 first, and then I sign the representation letter, and then we pass the balance of the resolutions. So I'm putting 1 and 4, and that's an authorisation to the Mayor and Chief Executive to sign the Audit New Zealand Letter of Representation for the 2021 annual report. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Excuse me while I sign a letter. I'll put my mask on.
We're the same team.
We are on the same team. There we go.
So now we get the unqualified audit. So manual swapping. Thank you. And now you can adopt your annual report if you so choose.
Right. So the next one is to adopt the annual report to authorise the CFO to make minor changes, including adding the word autotahi to the